Hello and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we are going to be digging into something that I think if you've worked on a team of any sufficient size, you've probably encountered. And depending on what kind of company you were working at, it may have been a good or a terrible experience. So we're going to dig into design systems and design tokens with somebody who is an expert, one of the biggest names in the design token space, Brad Frost. So today's episode is going to be very kind of foundational. I've got a lot of questions about how we make things work. How do you draw the line between too much design system and not enough? How do you decide what's a token and what's not? All sorts of things that are hopefully going to help me and ideally help you make better decisions about how to build, think about, and even just interact with if you're not the builder of a design token system or design system. Being able to work with them effectively and have a good communication with the team that builds and maintains that library. So let's jump on into that. We're starting out with something a little bit new this time, so buckle up. Before we jump into this video, let's talk a little bit about hiring. Hiring is hard right now. It's extremely noisy and it requires a lot of technical and interviewing skill. And that's why having a good partner is such a power up. G2I will do live technical screens based on your job description that is going to help you place engineers so much faster. That's how companies like Differential were able to place 10 engineers about 12 times faster than they were on their own. And all those engineers were ramped up super fast because of how well they were screened. You should go find out more about them to see how they can help you hire. Isn't that neat? What's up, everybody? And welcome, Brad. How you doing?
Hey, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We realized before we went live that you and I have known each other forever, but we've never actually spoken. Like, this call is the first time that we've had a voice-to-voice communication of any sort.
Yeah. A few email threads back and forth, I feel like, over the years. But yeah, it's so great to connect and even though it's not in person, but well, next time we'll hug and high five.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start by doing some very high level. So in one or two sentences, can you tell me what the heck the difference is between design tokens and design systems?
Yeah, so design tokens are a part of design systems. So design systems is this big umbrella under which I describe it, a design system, as the story of how your organization designs and builds digital interfaces. And there's a lot of ingredients that can go into telling that story. And so things like a component library, which we're all kind of familiar, here's your buttons, here's your alerts, here's your form controls, are one important facet of that. And but then design tokens are this kind of other facet, this other sort of subsystem within a design system that handles a lot of the aesthetic decisions, such as your colors and your typography and your border radius values and stuff like that. And I kind of describe the relationship between a component system and the aesthetic decisions, the token system, as kind of similar to a door, where it's like, if you're in the market for a door and you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you're buying your doors, and you go walk back to the door aisle, you're going to see some doors for sale, right? And
right.
Some might be like a primed white semi-hollow door, right, of standard dimensions for the contractors to pass ADA requirements and be compatible with all the other sort of building requirements and codes and all of that good stuff. And or it might be like a solid core door, like a solid oak door that isn't primed or anything like that. So it's like, you're not going to see turquoise or pink or orange doors in that aisle. What you're going to see is, here's some door frames. The hinges are on the right or the left. There's a hole for the hardware, for the doorknob. And in order to deal with things like, well, what color is this door going to be, or what hardware finish are we going to choose? Is it brushed nickel? Is it brass? Is it matte black? And so on and so forth. Those are different concerns, right? That's a separation of concerns that you're going to find in these different aisles. So what we found over the years working with so many different organizations is that design system tends to be talked about as the singular thing. But what we found is that kind of operationally, kind of having a component system that really delivers the semantics and the structure and the functionality of these UI components is really, really helpful. And then having this sort of separate thing that is handling more the cosmetic, right? Like the paint colors and the hardware finish, and having those things hang together, right? Like they have a relationship. The tokens flow through the components in order to render the results.
Got it. Okay, so that makes sense. And you mentioned, these are things you've picked up over the years, and I kind of papered over your own experience. So maybe that's a good place to go next. Is let's talk a little bit about who you are and sort of what your journey was into becoming, the person with the complete guide to design tokens and a whole design system and all that.
Yeah. So GeoCities, 1997, Dragon Ball Z,
Right.
And then started university as a music major and switched into something called media arts and design, and had a Flash class and a Dreamweaver class and a Photoshop class. And
did we have the same childhood? Like,
yeah, so probably. But yeah, so basically, yeah, read Designing with Web Standards, shortly after graduating, and got into making websites, and basically have been doing that ever since, really. And basically, so I've worked, kind of came up through working at different agencies and stuff like that. So getting, trying my hand at a bunch of stuff, WordPress sites, Magento sites, we did like a lot of like e-commerce work and stuff like that, but really working with all sorts of different clients. And then in 2013, I set out on my own as kind of like a freelancer. And over time, I kind of, basically started doing more and more consulting to help with teams. Because at that 2013 moment is where I had been sort of wrestling with a lot of the things that came along for the ride with responsive web design, right? So Ethan Marcotte, of course, 2010, 2011. And like I was working as, got a job as a mobile web developer at an agency called RGA in New York City. And they're like, this is a mobile web developer. I'm like, what's that? and so like, this was like at the time where the iPhone had just come out. The web world wasn't quite, focused there. It wasn't quite the thing there. So it was this great opportunity. It was very much like right time, right place, and figuring out by way of building sites for like Nike and, Tiffany and Company and MasterCard and stuff like that, to go, great, like how do we actually deliver a solid web experience to all of these different devices, not just screen sizes, but like literal like device classes. Like I was like working with like Blackberries and the different versions of that. It was wild. It was really cool. And so we were kind of doing this thing that became known as responsive web design. But it was through that experience that I'm like, well, it's not that it's like, oh, the homepage is hard to make responsive. It's like, no. It's just the nav, right? It's
sure.
We got this like horizontal nav on the header, and we need to do something different on the sort of small screens. So that's what kind of got me into this world of components and patterns and stuff.
And it's interesting too, because as you described, you worked on lots of different sites, and this is one of the things that I found is really interesting. The appreciation for design systems seems to come in when you've realized how everything is basically the same, but it's all very nuanced. And the nuances end up being different for different companies. So for example, when I was a I had an agency and we worked for a lot of companies that were small and medium businesses, they were personal trainers, gyms, I worked in the fitness industry a lot. And every one of those websites had the same 25 components, right? We were basically kind of like skinning these things that were very reusable. And then I went to IBM, and IBM was similar in that it had a lot of reusable components, but the concerns were completely different. I was on IBM Cloud, so it was like a dashboarding thing. And that was, if anybody remembers the Carbon Design System, I was there as Carbon Design was sort of hitting maturity. They were a team that sat next to us in Austin. And it was really interesting to watch the way that they thought about things, because my team had sort of built these libraries that were really reusable for us.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to IBM, where the Carbon Design System team was building a library of components that needed to be really reusable for not them. Like, they never actually built with Carbon Design. They built Carbon Design for me, who would then have to consume it and use it and like make something that worked. And the difference in how you have to think about that, because IBM we had teams building in Vue, we had teams building in React, we had teams building in Angular, there was stuff still running on Backbone, and all of that needed to work. So they're shipping a web components version, they're shipping an Angular Vue React version, and all that needed to be correct. And so like relying on, how do you get the colors in? How do you get all these different, make sure that the border radius is good, that the font sizes are consistent. When we've got teams using just about every framework ever created, what a nightmare of a situation to walk into and to have to make sense of. And yet they managed to do what I think they did a really fabulous job.
They did a good job. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But that's just it. And it's like the multi-framework thing is part of it. But we call it the multi all the things organization. So we're talking multi-brand, sub-brands, multiple product families. So you got your like marketing sites, but then you're like more dashboardy kind of things, your enterprise apps and stuff like that. You have campaigns, you have white labeling, you have dark mode and different color modes. You have all sorts of stuff that are just sort of sitting on top of it, like internationalization, localization, you name it. And everyone has a different flavor or specific, unique version of what they need to support. And so I love how you said it. It's like, it is all the same stuff, but at the same time, there's a lot of nuance in it. And that's kind of like what led to Atomic Design was a recognition of that nuance, which is
right.
We could take literally any of IBM's experiences, take any of your personal trainer websites, take any of the websites that I've worked on or anybody listening to this has ever worked on, as well as just things like bank kiosks and any other user interface. You can explode those experiences and be left with this finite set of fundamental building blocks to make that user interface. And that was kind of the world where we kind of, in 2013, the responsive design world was like, okay, components is a thing. There's like this idea of like patterns, and Bootstrap had come out, and it's like, here's components and you could build stuff with them. And to some degree, like that's actually still the story being told a little bit. But I was like, well, we could be a little bit more thoughtful, a bit more nuanced in how we think about this stuff, because it really is, we can break all of this stuff down into their fundamental building blocks, what I call atoms. And then those kind of combine together to form these relatively simple components. That's like, a label in an input and a note about that input. And those are all traveling together as a group, and those take on their own unique properties, right? And they have a relationship to one another in the same way that two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom make a water molecule that is not the same as two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom on their own, right? So they have these like simple things, and then those get combined into these relatively complex components that I call organisms. And then from there, you apply those to an actual like layout that looks like a screen, and I call that a template. And then basically the individual pages that have a certain, type of content or state, application state, or different user roles or whatever it is, that's kind of playing out at the page level. And so it's that addressing that dynamic that you're describing with the Carbon team, where it's like there's this kind of disconnectedness that tends to happen with design system teams now, where it's like they are in their own little like ivory tower, and it's like, well, we're building this stuff for other people to use, as you said. And it's like, well, how the hell do we actually make sure that it actually builds the right things? And this actually,
this kind of points to one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and why the title of the episode is how to make a design system that's not boring. So when we ran into these challenges with, like, we saw the need, like a lot of things were the same. We don't necessarily want to be reinventing every component from first principles. So we want to sort of bundle this stuff up. But we saw sort of first attempts at this come out in the form of the ones that really got traction were like Bootstrap and Material Design. And these were huge. Like it got to the point where you started to, like, you could just tell, like, this is a Bootstrap site, this is a Material Design site. And the good thing about that was that we got a lot of common patterns. We really solved a lot of the, what we used to call mystery meat navigation back in the early days. And so we built patterns out that we sort of solidified on. But the downside of this is that it sort of made every website boring. They all looked exactly the same. We didn't have character anymore. There wasn't that, like, GeoCities charm of, like, sure, it's chaos, but it's your chaos, right? And instead it was like, well, okay, well, we did this cookie cutter website and here you go. And people would come and look at it like, well, why is this different from any of the other websites? And it's like, well, materially it's not, from a UI standpoint. But then there's like sort of the other extreme of this, where we got so tokenized that I feel like it's equally unusable until you build your own superstructures on it. And I would say a good example of this is Tailwind, where, like, we took Tailwind and basically said, literally everything you can do with programming is available as a Tailwind class. There you go. There's your design system. And people are like, okay. And they use it. They do just fine. But, like, obviously everything is pretty bespoke at that point. You just sort of built an abstraction over CSS. So when you're talking about, the atomic design principles, maybe the biggest question I have is, how are you drawing the line between, like, not enough or too much? And how do you make sure that the thing you're creating doesn't suck all the creativity and personality out of what people use, what the people who use it, like, what they're assembling? Have you noticed heuristics or kind of some rules that have helped with this? Or is it just a very, like, vibe? You have to catch the nuance, and your taste is what determines that.
Yeah, no, this is great. And this is the art form, I think, of it all, because those ends of the spectrum, I think you did a great job at describing. I think that I'll put a few things on the table that are basically what we found to help. So design tokens is an important ingredient in helping, again, decouple the door frame from the paint choice, right? And that's what ended up happening with the bootstraps and the materials. Was a bunch of people were like, I want a functioning door. I want a high quality door frame. I want a sturdy button. I want an accordion that opens and closes. And I have this need for this thing, and I don't want to have to build it myself. And, well, here's this thing. And, but by adopting this thing, I all of a sudden get this ripple effect on my buttons, right? That's the equivalent of being like, I want a functional door, and I guess I'll take the one that comes in turquoise, and then like, sure, I'll figure out how to, peel off the paint and paint over it or whatever. But that's extra labor, right? And that's what we've seen with, like, boy, oh boy, have we seen some jacked up Bootstrap sites where it's like, here's Bootstrap, and then here's all of the code to undo. So that's kind of like what happened, is that, like, this, when it is all kind of bunched together, you kind of end up in this bad situation. And then so what ends up happening is that a lot of people are like, well, I don't want a turquoise button. I want a pink button. So I guess I'm going to have to go build the door frame from the ground up, which is just silly.
Well, yeah, and you end up with this situation where the teams building the design systems almost feel like they're at odds with the teams using them, because the teams are like, well, you haven't given us what we need to build what we have to build.
Yes.
And the design system team is like, yes, but work within the structures. And the team's like, you're not moving fast enough. And so, and this again kind of comes down to that balance of like, how do we make sure that we're giving enough, but not too much? And
yes. So that's I'll put a couple of things on the table. So there's a separation that comes with the design tokens as an important ingredient of addressing what you're describing here. And then the other aspects that we found to be incredibly helpful at sort of managing this in a sane way that really kind of diffuses a lot of that fighting words kind of stuff that comes from that inherent tension between design system teams and product teams. We've found it to be really, really helpful to establish what we tend to call the design system ecosystem, which is here's, rather than this design system being viewed as the singular entity that is the arbiter of all UI at the organization and is supposed to contain every solution for every single team. That's not a good idea. You're going to end up, polluting it with all sorts of stuff or making things that are overly brittle or whatever, right? So recognizing that and being like, okay, so the core design system really is the home of the settled science. This is the stuff that is truly universal, like meaning here's these check boxes and we want those things to be used by all of the people at the organization. Not a good idea, not a good use of your life energy to recreate a checkbox, right?
Right.
So that's what that layer is doing, is it's like, this is like the uncontroversial, the boring, the stuff that we've all done a bunch of times, and we got bigger fish to fry, right?
And that feels like, and that also kind of talks about finding that balance of like, listen, teams, you never should. Like, if you find yourself with the urge to reinvent a default browser input, don't. Like, these are the things we're choosing to not allow, right? Now, obviously, like, you don't say that about a presentation card. But like a checkbox, the label styling, making sure that your inputs have big enough text, like the little things that you pick up by designing UI. Like if your font size in an input is under 16 pixels, it causes the whole UI to zoom in when you tap it on a phone.
Yep.
Little stuff that you just learn by being annoyed by it forever. And so yes, put that into the design system and say, listen, don't use anything other than this. Like, if you want to change this, come see us. But I promise you don't have a good enough reason to not use this.
Yeah. No, that's it. So it's like the core design system, right, tends to err on the side of the more kind of like atomic end of the spectrum, right? Which is like, here are these more kind of like building blocks. And then there's kind of more compositions, right, which tend to be different across different product teams and stuff like that. That's where this introduction of what we call like a recipe layer is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And what we found the introduction of this recipe layer to do is to, again, sort of reduce or remove entirely that tension between the product team and the design system team. Because what recipes are, so material design is Google's design system. Google has a bunch of different products: Gmail, Google Maps, Google Docs, Gemini, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. YouTube.
Extremely different functionality under one umbrella.
Wildly different products, right? So you don't see the like YouTube share bar in material design, or you don't see like the Gmail slat, right? Those things are all kind of existing, sitting at this layer that's on top of the core material design library. And here are these things that are sometimes compositions of the material design components, right? Where, we need a card, and the card needs to be arranged and have this kind of content in it, and have this certain design and showcase this kind of stuff. whereas the next product needs a different card in a different order, right? So here's the product card, or here's the research card, or here's the related video card, or the event card. So that's this recipe layer gives product teams ownership and agency and autonomy to be able to create, influence, inform UI at this layer that helps them build great products without abandoning the system, right? Without abandoning the core design system. So that like helps draw cleaner boundaries between who owns what, who's responsible for what, and what to do when product teams come to the design system, they don't see what they need. They're able to go, oh, okay, well, still have a conversation, and we talk a lot about governance. But at the same time, it's like, oh, I don't see a tertiary button in the core design system, and I need that, and I need to ship that by the end of next sprint.
Right.
Go for it, right? Like you own this layer, and then it also sets up this recipe layer kind of architecturally and from a process perspective, helps kind of build the relationships between the system team and the product teams, because they could go, the design system team could kind of check in on all of these different recipe libraries and go, oh, that's an interesting approach, or, oh, how's that working out? Or, oh, I see this same solution being represented in like 4 different product recipe libraries. So maybe that's a good candidate to sort of
pull it back down. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I could pepper you with questions for the rest of our time, but I want to get practical with this. So let me switch us over into the pair programming view here. And I'm just going to make a quick appeal to everybody who's watching. If you are enjoying this, you want to see more content like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share it with your friends, do all the things that send a signal to YouTube that you're enjoying yourself so that more people see it. And that's how I pay for food and stuff. So thank you. We are looking at Brad's website here. Look at this fun thing up at the top. I enjoy this very much. So this is bradfrost.com. That's going to be the hub for all of the Brad Frost things. We've also, you are working on a course, or you've released a course.
Yes.
Yeah. And so do you want to talk about this for a second? I'll put the link up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's designtokenscourse.com, and it's called Subatomic, and building into the atomic design metaphor. And basically, like, design tokens was coined in 2016 by Gina Ann and the team at Salesforce, the Lightning design system. So had design tokens been a thing whenever I was talking about atomic design, I would have put it right there. So it's kind of but conceptually, like, they really work well together, because basically, again, these are the kind of subatomic pieces, the color and the typography, that don't actually do anything or mean anything until you actually apply them to a user interface element. So it's this very interesting thing. But yeah, so the course, we have worked with so many different teams, including like almost 10% of the Fortune 100 on these kinds of problems. And we've worked directly with so many teams to ultimately get them to the same general spot. And so we've like learned so much along the way. Yeah, we've worked with like Dotdash Meredith, which owns like all of these different publications, Time, Life, and all of these different places. Caterpillar with its super strong brand, Pfizer with over 300 consumer brands, United Airlines, NASDAQ. So all of these have, again, that different all the things set up in its unique shape. Architecturally and conceptually, where we've landed is, there's some really sturdy stuff. We've done it with so many different organizations and so many different enterprises that we're like, this feels really good. So we finally got it into this position where we're able to say, for basically the cost of a single meeting of arguing about the naming of these tokens and stuff like that, like we could kind of give you 13 hours of videos, but also like the big thing is actually providing a token architecture in both Figma and in code, and that are like perfectly in sync. And the way that we've actually designed the course is to actually go through the design and code literally side by side, one after the other, versus going like, here's this thing in Figma and here's Figma variables. And then in the next chapter, we'll get into code.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Bringing these worlds together. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So let me do, I'll throw to your Blue Sky as well. Is that your main social driver these days, or you got another one?
Yeah. Like it and LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn, although I like the old Twitter vibes of Blue Sky, but yeah, it's Brad Frost on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect there unless you're a recruiter.
Unless you're a recruiter. All right. So you sent me this like ready-made custom Figma thing.
Yeah. So this is from the course. So if you go in the left sidebar in click on color, that's a good place to start. So what you could kind of see, we created a fictitious ice cream company. So the way that we're demonstrating the power of design tokens is through ice cream. So we have a vanilla theme, which is our
right after my heart
brand. Yeah, 100% brandless vanilla theme, right? That's just kind of like black and white neutrals. Yeah, you can zoom in on that. So it's like, here's this stuff, pretty boring, pretty grayscale. But then we get into our strawberry theme, which kind of has, this pink color palette and stuff.
Oh, we get a little more color down there.
Yeah. And then we sort of go and have a chocolate theme. And then we have a dark chocolate theme, which is our kind of like.
Oh, so you light mode, dark mode. Yeah. Nice. Okay, I'm with it.
Yeah. So then, like, probably the best thing to do from here is if you scroll on the left-hand side, you can go to product screens. And then what you can see is you can kind of see a few different screens in action, right? So we have like an e-commerce marketing site, like homepage kind of experience, right? And this is with the vanilla theme applied. And then if you go here, then we have like a checkout flow. So like more of like a utilitarian formy kind of page.
Right.
And then we have a third screen where
like the analytics and
yeah. So here's your dashboard, your enterprise experience. Cause this is something that we've encountered so many times where it's like, well, our customer excellence team has wildly different needs than our marketing team. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is like show how a single token system can kind of travel to all of these different product experiences. Yeah. So if you click on one of these, and you might not actually have the right access.
Yeah, you might have to make the changes because I don't have.
All right. Yeah, let me do that real quick. So we're looking at it. Can I see you?
Yeah, there you are.
I'll wave to you. Yeah. All right. So from here, what we can do is we can actually sort of swap out the different color modes. And so there's a drop down where you're able to basically say like, change this theme to strawberry. And then so you could see all of the product screens kind of updating to match that strawberry theme now, right? And then I could do the same and I'll change it to chocolate. And then and then I'll do it the same and change it to dark chocolate, right? So
yeah, and then you can kind of see some of the pieces here, like in the dark mode, like the form is just got those nice little, quality of life things that you want when you switch into dark mode, as opposed to what I've seen with some design systems where you switch in dark mode, but like the inputs are still going to blow you out with a white background, and just those little things that like that's the stuff that makes it feel polished and nice.
Yeah, and we have like a little like playground thing in the in like the left too, that where we're basically, see if you could go there. Yeah, try to drag this across, or I could kind of, here's our, like, we call it like the kitchen sink component. But
Ooh,
yeah, so you're able to, like, just like you were just saying,
what?
to make sure that you're like actually doing things right and
Can I?
aren't slipping between the cracks.
Oh, okay. This is not what we're talking about today, but I have so many questions about how you did this because this is so cool.
Yeah, the short answer is, like, this is Figma variables, which was introduced by Figma in 2023.
And they just have like you can set it to an artboard or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you basically like assign variables and say, like, I want this one to be theme of strawberry, and then the variables will remap themselves. So it gets a lot closer to where we've been in code for a much longer time.
Slick. Yeah, I should pay more attention to what Figma's doing. I'm just over here drawing my rectangles and living in the Stone Age, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is very cool. Let me get back to following you here.
And then I think, if you don't mind, I will. Is this a private chat in the chat here? I think it says
the private chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share that with you, and the password. If you could just not share that, because this is all right. That's the password there. So this link here is
pull
like
this up real quick and get.
Yeah. So what this is, so that was like the Figma side of it, and then basically like the code side of it is a Storybook instance, right? That basically like shows the exact same thing. So if you sort of scroll, yeah, you might need to X out of a couple of things just to make some space there. And then, yeah, you could even close that controls panel in the bottom, and then we'll get some real estate there.
Oh, I got you.
So here we go. So here's our like vanilla theme and like the tokens for that. But then in the top, you could see that there's like a little drop down, right? So now you could kind of change that. And now you could see, like, here's like the tokens in code for that. And then so on and so forth. So this is like the exact same thing as what we are looking at in Figma. But then if you scroll down to the bottom of the Storybook sidebar, all the way down, and then go to, the homepage. Homepage is always a sexy one. So now do that same sort of
zoomies
switching. Yeah, we got to, like, some little like interactivity, because Figma and the browser are not the same as we know and tend to forget.
And then we can. Yep. Love it. So
yeah, so it's basically like trying to like paint this picture of, it's like, this is what we're trying to establish with a solid design system and design token system, is that designers are using these ingredients, right? Are using these tokens to create these branded, high quality visual UX best practices. And then developers are using those exact same tokens to build the experiences, right? So there's some things that are experientially different between these different environments, right? This is obviously the browser, and the other thing is the static design tool. But at the same time, it's really about this shared language and sort of wielding design tokens to disseminate design best practices to your product.
Yeah, and this is nice too, because like when you start getting into the design tokens, now that Figma does have variables and you have the ability to sort of do these things back, there's even tools now that'll try to like sync your Storybook components into Figma as components, so that you can
vice
like
versa. Yep.
Yeah, so that way you're able to kind of maintain in the one place that it's wherever your team considers a source of truth to be, and make it easier to do all that kind of, like, I think that is super helpful.
Yeah. And we have like a whole section of the course on that, because we've seen it's like one of the first things that comes up is like immediately people just go to, how do we automate and synchronize between these worlds? And it's just kind of like, Yeah, that one's like a little, that's maybe not the best example, but if you go to button or any of these,
You can
there
see
we go.
kind of the chart. Yeah, I mean, I love this though. Like, it's nice to be able to just flip through and kind of see what's available and like make different decisions based on like, oh yeah, okay, I see how this would work.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you can go shop. Like, shopping for things is very helpful for me. Like, being able to see what I can even do. And I also really like that it's sort of, I can see that there's so let me see if I understand this in atomic design principles. So we've got the atoms are these sorts of things, right? Or these aren't.
I'll stop you right there because
I'm already wrong.
A little bit mixing metaphors, which is hard, and that's like the hard thing about this stuff. And I kind of step in it every time because I'm out there throwing around a bunch of metaphors all the time, and so people. You are certainly not the first. I'll just say that. But so this.
Which one of these is the door frame?
The door frame. Like if you go to the button and hit the vanilla theme, like that's our door frame, right? So it's like if you strip away the chocolate theme from that, you will get this is our door frame, right? Like this is what we mean by a primary button. Is like semantically, it means that it's this thing that's meant to be to kind of stand out as a thing, right? We just have a default button that's your kind of run of the mill stuff. But there's a background, there's a font color, there's a border radius value or none defined. But this is like this is providing that door frame, which is structural in nature. And if we have like a button with an icon, right? That icon is going to sit next to the button text. That's the identical equivalent of the hinges needing to be on the right or the left in order for the door to function, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about is like we're drawing a line in CSS specifically between styles that are more structural in nature, things like display grid, like this thing right here, right? That's like entirely a structural component, right? Like a grid type thing where it's like here's this, and that's not doing anything aesthetic, that is controlling its layout, and we want that to be sturdy, right? We don't necessarily want that to be branded, even though you can kind of like get into some stuff, right? But these are our door frames, right? These unstyled, stripped down, not bringing any ripples or box shadows or pastels or rainbow colors or anything that's like branded. This is our door frame, right? And then it's kind of like from the exercise of sort of feeding different token themes through these components that we get the results that we're looking for.
Okay.
So I'll put one more thing on the table because you're starting to get into it. So if you look at design tokens, we have these 3 tiers, and this is like how this magic trick works. So the 3 tiers of a token system are what kind of unlocks this stuff. And basically the tier 1 level of a token system is simply describing the available ingredients that you have to work with. Just like the things in a restaurant's kitchen and in the pantry, for every dish, you're not going to use everything that's on those shelves, right? But that's what you have to work with, right? That's what's in stock, right? And that analogy or metaphor of a restaurant is important because that's like in the back room that only the cooks who are professionally trained have access to. You don't just want like a random restaurant patron to like kick open the double doors and go grab like, a big thing of flour and then walk back to their table. You'd be like, what the hell are you doing? You're going to make a mess for all of us.
Right.
So tier 1 are really these kind of raw ingredients. And then what we're doing at the tier 2 level is we're actually mapping those and giving those tokens jobs to do in a user interface.
Okay.
So this is like we're looking at, right? Theme, color, background, default, right? That's applied to the body, right? That's applied to the body of the interface. So whatever's in that slot is going to show up on your body, right? So for a dark mode theme, right, for the dark chocolate theme, if you switch that theme switcher there, you'll see that color background default is set to a dark color, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you scroll down that page a little bit and get to the content colors, this is like where we're able to really ensure that the content that's sitting on top of it is of sufficient contrast, and we're able to create accessible experiences, right? Because we have now theme, color, content default. So content default is sitting on top of background default. So these things are like traveling together so that we're able to ensure that things always kind of render the right results.
Got it. Okay, cool. So this is, and what I like about this is that these are the sorts of things that these ideas have sort of successfully disseminated out into the community, where I do a broken version of this instinctively now, where I sort of like set up colors, and then I'm like, okay, but what do I use these colors for? And then I'm like, well, this is my text, this is my heading, this is my whatever. And like, I'm not being nearly as thoughtful as like, oh, well, what if it's on this background or that background? Like, I'm just,
Yeah. The poor man's version of it is fine, right? Like that might be all you need, and that is perfectly acceptable. And that's like one of the things that we like drive home again and again and again in the course is like what we're looking at here is like enterprise grade. This can like power multi all of the things. Your token system might quite literally be, here's a handful of colors that are coming from whatever open props or Tailwind or Material, or it doesn't even matter where they're coming from, or your brand book. And then you basically say, color primary, color secondary. Maybe that's all your token system needs to be. And that is perfectly acceptable.
And it sort of feels like the approach would be, whether you're a big team or a small team, you kind of start with what you know to be true. And then as you observe things, like as you observe the desire paths being worn in, you can kind of pave those and make sure that people at least stay consistent. Because the thing that I've always noticed is that we sort of land on like some consistent colors, but then people will grab their colors using the color picker, and so you end up with these really subtle variations in like grays and stuff like that. That just make life a little messier, because you can't, if you do a rebrand, you can't just like find and replace, right? Because all the colors are one or two points off, and so now you really got to like go look at everything, and it makes these sorts of things really hard. So as you see a theme emerge, like, oh, we always use this font for our headings. Great, now you can turn that into a token and like confidently say everything that is using this font is now like font heading. You're like, oh, great. Now, if I refactor, I'm confident that it's going to at least use the right font. And then I can go look around and make sure that it still looks good. And then, eventually those things start to feel clean, as opposed to, I don't know. I always, I had this really good conversation with Dan Mall about the idea of like emergent design versus like intentional design, and how you kind of can't have one without the other when you're working with teams. Because if you sit down and you're like very scientifically like, this is the platonic ideal of a design system, then you send it out into the world, it falls apart immediately, because you made it academically, you didn't make it practically. But that if you only let it emerge, it becomes this sort of like Rube Goldberg-y Byzantine nightmare. So you kind of have to have this balance of like moving between observe it and watch what happens, and then, okay, prune it. And, it's like gardening, really.
Yeah. It's, Dan and I collaborated, I feel like for many years. So we really like lived that dynamic for a long time. And also, we're both not of the mindset of, it's like, again, design systems that are boring. It's really like we both kind of come from like the agency world and like a lot more like high impact kind of stuff. So it was really kind of fun to simultaneously play with that, real expressiveness and that branded experience and all of that stuff that we know to be true and know to be great product experiences, but also at the end of the day, these systems are very pragmatically driven. And like, that's one of the things that I love to remind people of, is because people tend to think of things like, oh, design system equals material design, and we're a small shop and we don't need that firepower and stuff. Like, true, absolutely. But do you have a website with more than one web page? Well, you need to figure out how to get that header and that footer from that first page over to the second page, right? So it's like very, very quickly you start learning. It's like components and like sort of capturing these decisions and creating some semblance of systems is just good practice.
It's that old adage, like, if you're not using a framework, you're building one. I think it's the same with this. If you're not using a design system, you're building one, and it's you can't escape that. Like, I remember the days of every HTML page was its own bespoke thing, and like, in order to update the website, you had to copy paste every single change to every single file in the website, which is, again, kind of one of those like archaic charm things about the old web, whereas you would click through, the older the pages got, the funnier the design would get, because you'd sort of do this step through time of like, oh, they haven't updated. I call them
Benjamin Button. Yeah. Benjamin Button designs. Yeah.
But today practically there's zero chance you're not using a design system. Yeah. It's just about whether or not the design system has been intentionally created and sort of thought through from a, like, can anybody but me understand this? Could I ask for help? Or also, like, are the teams being forced to create a design system as they're working, which isn't really a good use of their mental energy, when what we really want them to do is like ship the things that we ask them to build.
Yeah. And this is, I think, one of like the real superpowers that come with design token systems, and kind of treating them as a kind of distinct product compared to the component system. So with all of these enterprises that we've worked with, and what you described at IBM, you have every framework in play under the sun. So to ask teams to go, oh, hey, we're doing web components now, you need to, stop shipping your product and refactor to get this total parallel or lateral move in order for you to be using this component library, which is not a great use of time. Now, that said, opportunistically, if you are sort of like touching something, it makes sense to kind of like pull that stuff in as, in a pragmatic and thoughtful way. But the cool thing is, with design tokens, what those teams might not be on the hook to do is, oh, hey, you need to adopt the design system's component system. Like you said, like they've already built all of those things. But then this happens, which is, well, our agency of record rolled out our rebrand or our redesign, and you all need to update to introduce the new brand. And everybody just goes, ooh. And that's one of those things where it's like, those are part of like giant, huge, strategic, multi-million-dollar affairs.
Right.
And we've worked with so many organizations where all the product teams are just like kicking and screaming and stuff, because they're just like, they see it as a chore. The brand, the leader, the VP of brand, or the CMO, or whoever's in charge of that stuff is like cracking the whip. Everybody's like trying to make this stuff happen, and they're seeing it as this chore, right?
Right.
But they don't want to. It's very risky to then go in and start touching and blowing up their component system. So what we've found these design token systems to be is this really great sort of dipping your toes into the water of adopting the design system. It's kind of like design system adoption light, where you're able to sort of go, here's the token system, rip out your old values, or even better yet, you don't even need to rip out your old values. You just need to remap those existing variables to the new token system. So we did this with Caterpillar. They had SAS variables in there that was like $cat-yellow set to cat's really famous color of yellow. And what we did to help them adopt the design token system was, instead of that being, $cat-yellow mapped to a hex value, it was instead mapped to the design token system's CSS custom property.
Yeah, I
It's
think
like
that's great.
it's like a really accessible, pragmatic way of kind of starting to ingest the system. And the cool thing is that they're able to sort of get all of that kind of, multi-theming and different color
Right.
modes and whatever else kind of comes from the token system kind of for free with pretty minimum amount of work, which we found to be like a way easier sell than trying to be like, you need to bulldoze your React component library in favor of this other thing.
Well, and I mean, I think that's also one of those things where what we're thinking about as the team that's rolling out the design system initiative is, oh, we're just gonna like quickly swap everything out, and what that ends up being is inevitably you find the corner cases and, oh, well, if we switch from, if we were on Backbone and we switch to React, now we have to like refactor all of our things to use like the React paradigms, which means that it's going to take us 6, 7, 8 months to like rebuild these. So it's rarely practical to just go all in on like rip the whole UI out, put in a new thing using the system. Yeah. But it is pretty practical to say, hey, if you're going to go touch a corner of the UI, just like take a minute and swap out all of the hard-coded values to use these design tokens. And if you're touching something that's using one of our new components, just swap in the new thing. It's going to make your life easier. And then later on, when we have changes for you, you don't have to do any work. You can just update the design system library, and it's going to automatically give you all these changes. And that was sort of what the approach we took at IBM was, a very like, if the ticket touches something that hasn't been updated in a while, if it doesn't have any weird like logic that's tied to the framework that we'd have to do a lot of work to back out, just switch it and see what happens. Because if you can spend 20 minutes replacing this component, and we'll eventually touch this whole UI, in a couple of years, we'll have completely rolled this whole thing over. And at no point did we have to stop production to like do the full rip and replace. And then we get all this free maintenance stuff. But granted, when do companies have enough of an attention span to like stay on something for 2 years and to fund a design system team for long enough to make this? Like, there's so much calculus you have to do in any of these situations, because they're all going to be different and weird, and all the politics are strange. But in an ideal world where everybody is rowing in the same direction, this is a really effective way to roll things out.
Yeah. No, I love how you describe that, and dare I say, it sounds downright sensible.
It's this interesting thing where like I always laugh though, because every time I describe something, in my head, I'm like, if everybody just thought exactly like me, we wouldn't have any problems. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what's happening in all of these meetings, is we're all walking going, if everybody just thought exactly the way I thought it, we wouldn't have any problems.
It's really like the human, like, it's, as a consultant, right? I've gotten to see people's protectiveness and opinions about, decisions they've made or things they feel really strongly about. It's really fascinating. It is really like a window into the world of people's minds and what, they're trying to protect and what they get defensive about and what they get annoyed by. And there's a real pragmatism, I think, that in this kind of, here's this is helpful, and it's our express goal to help you. Mm-hmm. And like that it reframes like just like carrying that intention. Now, that's not to say that that brand officer or whatever, that's like, we need to get the redesign out there, they're shaking their fist and they're wielding a stick, right? I think that there's like a real opportunity to just be like, hey, yeah, here are these pragmatic ways you can start. We want to partner with you. We want to collaborate with you. We want to work with you. And we want to better understand what you're up to, because we actually have some tools and some things that will actually make your work go better, smoother, faster, and yield better results. That said, if you're like, I feel incredibly proud of this stuff that we're doing and we're not touching this, I've learned over the years to just be like, obviously hash it out and have a spirited conversation about it. But at the end of the day, it's like, I try to be really, really careful about, I think you mentioned it maybe in our correspondence, is like the whole like policing thing. It's like you really want to get away from that and really sort of evolve into a real customer service model, but beyond customer service model, like just being like, I'm a human being and I'm like working on stuff that's here to help you, another human being that I care about and want to help. So it's like, that's the thing that I just really try to instill in all of the teams we work with.
I think that's such a good way to go about it. And I agree. Like, it's never fun to be like the team code cop, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If you are enforcing, like, before we had things like Prettier and ESLint, if you were the one who had to enforce the coding style guide, or if you're the one who has to enforce the design system, or if you're the one who has to enforce like language guidelines for writing copy, it's never fun, because your whole job eventually becomes go yell at everybody else for not doing things right. And it inevitably changes the dynamic on the team. So finding ways, the way I've talked about this, I've got a blog post on it buried somewhere. It just make the right thing the easy thing, right? Like I've heard this described 1,000 ways: the pit of success, the cow paths, the whatever it is. But if you can make it so that if somebody chooses to do things the right way, it will make them faster and do less work.
Yeah.
They will eventually make that choice, though. You just kind of drift toward optimization, and if you can smooth a groove where if everybody gets in that groove, they're doing less, getting paid less, they're not getting yelled at. Like they're gonna take that path.
Yep.
And if you find yourself trying to build something and getting anybody to use your thing is a huge battle, it's probably the way you've designed it. You probably haven't found a way to make it the easy thing yet, right?
Yeah. And that's why the human connection matters so much, especially in the early days of these things, because people will be like, we have this thing built and like nobody wants to use it. And it's because it's like, well, you need to do the work of helping them understand, hey, this thing exists. That's like step one. And then step two is like actually saying, we know that this is new, like that, like this is new, this is different. And understandably, people, when presented with new different things, hey, Jason, I want you to radically transform your workflow. I don't understand it. He said no. It's like, well, and like you need to build that trust. You need to build that rapport. You need to like help them kind of get to a place where they're actually in a position to even consider it, right?
And coming at it from a point of empathy, the battlefield of code bases is strewn with the nonsense that gets created by somebody who was like, if we just change all this stuff, it'll make everything better.
Yeah.
Right. And then inevitably they don't follow all the way through, or maybe they hadn't kind of thought through all the things. And so we just end up with tech debt on tech debt on tech debt because somebody had a vision. And what reason does anybody have to trust me to be the one who's actually going to follow through? Because everybody makes that promise. Everybody coming and waving a big plan is saying, if you just do this, your life's going to get easier. So you have to be able to lead with real examples, right? And making sure that what you're asking people to do is small and it's going to immediately get them results that they can look at and say, oh, no, you're right, this is working. A quick anecdote: when I was at Netlify, one of the things that we were running on is we had a docs page, we had a marketing site, and we had our actual app, like the app.netlify.com. Each of these was running on a slightly different version of design. So colors were a little bit off, typography wasn't quite right, all of the components were bespoke. And this was a product of, early on, everybody's working fast and the teams, we didn't have a design system team. So everybody kind of did their best. But then as the design drifts, like we start updating the marketing page, but we don't have time to pull that into the app. And then the docs page, we didn't actually have anybody maintaining that. So the docs team, who can write code, but that's not their job, are doing the best they can. But it's sort of, and over time, we got to the point where we're like, hey, we want to roll this thing out. And we were like, we can't, we don't have time to work on all 3 sites. And it was so painful that like, this was a constant point of tension in the company where we would say, we hate the way this looks, but it's too much work to fix.
Yes.
a lot of that is because it's cross-functional and all these things.
Yes.
So, one of the things that I realized, hey, maybe this is what being a VP is all about. I went and I talked to the right people on each of the teams, and I was like, hey, if I borrowed like 3 people off your team for a week and put them in a room with 3 people off the other teams for a week, do you think we could solve this problem in a way that let everybody at least move forward? And they were like, yeah, I think so. And so I got our VP of marketing to like, let us take over her house for a week. And we did this thing called Web Cohesion Week. And we had 15, maybe 20 people all descended, including the stakeholders. Like I got all the marketing, product marketing, engineering, everybody was there so that they could all make decisions fast. And all we did was implement design tokens.
Yeah.
So the whole company got on a shared set of colors, a shared set of typography, a shared set of like spacing and stuff. We didn't introduce a component library. We weren't changing the UI. We were just cleaning up so that they all looked like the same website.
Yep.
The fallout of that, though, was that the teams suddenly were able to implement new things fast. And like when we did a rebrand later, it was like the last thing that happened as I was leaving the company. That rebrand went
blue. Yeah.
It went shockingly smooth because everybody had the foundations in place. And so it was like, okay, this week of pain ended up paying so many dividends that the teams could like do the work later on. And it really, it's one of those things. It's like, could I have gotten the buy-in to take a month? Almost certainly not. Right. Yeah. So what's the smallest chunk you can do that people will actually give you permission to do? You can, carve out the time, get the cross-functional support to make a little bit of progress so that people can feel the difference of like, hey, we made this little bit of change and it was good. What if we took one more step and then one more step? And suddenly you've actually got really lasting change in place.
That's beautiful. I love that on so many levels. I'll give you a couple things that I think stuck out to me. One is that recognition and that doing the work to pull different groups of people together. That's amazing and takes a lot of tact. So congratulations, because that is the actual terrain of doing good technical work at an organization. And
it turns out 95% of his job is getting people to talk to you.
Right. And it's really, and I think that this is one of the things is it's just like, it's like, I don't give a shit what these blues or seafoam greens are. Like, the thing is, what we want is the decision, right? Is the result of that. And I think that's really beautiful, because like a lot of times that is weird. Another thing is that you call a week of pain. It's like, you could easily say, well, that week of pain, and I would reframe it and maybe not even say pain. Sure, it's hard work, but at the end of the day, you're talking about alleviating months and months, if not years and years, of bigger pain.
And like the joke is that it was a week of pain, but honestly, we branded it. We called it Web Cohesion Week. One of the designers made us like stickers that said cohes, and we have like all the people that we worked with, they all ended up being closer as a result of it, right? Like it.
That's it.
It really does build these team connections,
and quite literally like the connective tissue. So you're building the relationship, human relationships. You're building this architectural, this technical relationship. And once you have those relationships established, you can pave those cow paths and continue doing that. And you bring that stuff together, you show that it's successful, you just do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, to the point where you're like, oh, wow, like this is actually like we're all really aligned, and we're figuring out what's shared versus what's different. And nobody's just kind of lobbing things out, but we're actually able to like listen to each other and figure out like what we're all doing and what our priorities are. So like there's this, again, this like little connective tissue that can be the real groundwork for like a super healthy culture. And in our experience, and that's why we dig on atomic design so much, and building through real things,
right?
So much where people are like, I don't understand. We created the token system, nobody wants to use it. We're shopping it around and it's like, you gotta just get that get that relationship going. You got to get that connective tissue in there. So I
I
love it.
I had a similar experience at IBM where like I showed up and all the teams didn't really talk, right? And I'm one of the people who shouldn't be RTO because everybody's like, oh yeah, in the office you're way more productive. I am so much less productive in an office because I just want to chat.
Yeah.
And so I would go in, but one of the things that was sort of an accidental lesson for me was how important the interpersonal connections were, because I had always heard that these teams didn't get along, but I was like, well, these are just people on the floor, right? So I'd walk around the floor and it was lunchtime and I'd say, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Come with me. And I would get people from 3-4 different teams to all come and sit together and have lunch. And like inevitably somebody starts talking about what they're working on and they're, like, oh yeah, there's this frustration. And somebody's like, oh, we just did something that might actually like work with that. And suddenly all these teams are talking to each other. They're sending each other ideas and like supporting and sharing code bases. And like, somebody came to me later and was like, wow, how do you build relationships like that? And I was like, man, I was eating tacos. I didn't do anything. Like, I just didn't want to eat alone. But it really is.
Yeah,
like,
it's beautiful.
Those little things are no amount of structure or academic correctness or code perfection is going to paper over the fact that if people don't know it exists, if people don't have any reason to trust you, if people aren't confident that you have their best interests in mind, they're never going to use it. Right.
Yeah.
Like this is the standing battle. You got to go in and just show people that like, I'm here because I see some pain and I've experienced that pain because I've worked in these systems before. And I have this step that we can take that's going to make it easier. And if people believe you, it works. And if they don't, you're dead in the water. It doesn't matter how good your system is.
It's so funny. I've had so many conversations that have started with people being, the guard is totally up. They're just immediately, and so much of it, hate to like use this as like as a parallel, but it's like a dog that's been like mistreated. It's like you approach it and it's like it's like they shy away, or they're like you could totally
we're
see
gonna
that,
do
like,
we're gonna do a redesign, and they're just like 10,000 yards stare. Like, you've been here before.
The human equivalent of like the tail totally tucked under the dogs. You're just like, and you have to be like, it's okay, I'm here, it's okay.
I promise you, like we have snacks and cuddles. That's all we got here.
But it really is, and I think that you said something really important there, is like the technical merits is like what I think a lot of like especially developers tend to like lean in on and like split hairs about and have their holy wars and whatever. And it's like, I honestly don't care. In fact, I love mustache and handlebars. It's like, give me more of that. Like we could build a very, very functional and beautiful and amazing experience using relatively ancient technology. And what actually makes or breaks this thing is not the choice of templating language or CSS solution or whatever. It like has everything to do about our working relationship. And the other thing I'll say about that is what I'm witnessing now. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to like show you the Figma angle of this is that nowhere more do I see this disparity and this disconnectedness is between the worlds of design and development right now. I have, really strong feelings about this, about what I feel to be the kind of fundamental brokenness of the designer developer workflow right now, where you basically are like, what's the MCP or the how do we like kick this stuff out at an API, or here's dev mode, and it's like we are literally treating collaboration between disciplines as a toggle switch.
Right.
And once upon a time, back to your taco conversation, it's like those designers had to bother us because Photoshop or earlier versions of Sketch or whatever design tools were there weren't able to make the responsive experiences, they weren't good enough to be able to sort of like paint as full a picture as these tools do now. And we've kind of crossed over this threshold. And my hypothesis is that it's like Figma's gotten to this like good enough state where designers could just kind of like hang out in their comfort zone. And the way that these processes are often structured is that they're upstream from the developers. So they're like putting their headphones on, they're doing their thing, they're getting the approvals, same as always kind of been the case. And now it's just like, oh yeah, ready for dev, flip the toggle switch and implement this. And unsurprisingly, people are going, oh, my developers are having issues,
I think you're touching on sort of the core challenge that I wanted to dig into on this show, which is that this is how design systems become boring. Like if somebody who is not in the process of building is making decisions sort of absent context, things necessarily have to be sterile. Like you are either designing something that just straight up won't work, or you're designing something that's so general purpose that it can't have character, right?
Yeah.
And so the designers and the developers working in collaboration, talking through, well, when we try to use this, it doesn't quite work because like this feels off, or hearing from the users and watching the users, go through something and like they didn't realize that this was interactive because this, it looks like a static card. Then you can go back and say like, hey, how do we fix that, right? And then suddenly you're having a conversation. You're starting to have ideas that are based on the workflow that's useful in your app, not the thing that you've sort of academically decided is a platonic ideal for the internet, right?
Yep.
And this is where magic happens. Like if you are taking capable people with a diverse set of skills and you're putting them on a problem that's unique to them, you're going to get a solution that is unique and interesting and solves that problem in a novel way. If you take those same people and you put them in a silo and you say, solve this problem the best way you know how with your expertise, they have to sort of play defensively because, well, how is this code going to survive design? How is this design going to survive implementation? Well, if you can't talk to somebody, then you make a lot of decisions differently.
Yep. No, 100%. And what's fascinating is that what I witness is this, again, this kind of thing that's calcified in many organizations is design is upstream from development. I feel like that's a pretty uncontroversial thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, again, like that sort of like tools and stuff are so wildly more immature than what we've been doing. And so for design tokens specifically, Figma variables, again, came out 2 years ago, right? Like 2 summers ago. And so you have a bunch of designers who have been used to things like layer 46, copy 32, kind of,
right.
Kind of designers not necessarily historically known for rigorous naming conventions and things like that, all of a sudden being sort of given this task of creating these token systems using these tools. And well, who does have a lot of experience naming variables and giving names for colors and typography? Developers do, right? So this is my sort of like call to action for any developer listening to the show. It's like you have this massive opportunity to participate in the design process and to help with the structure, to help guide, to help be that Sherpa, to really help these people who are relatively new to this experience, show them the ropes and show them how it's done. And don't take the given workflow as a given. Like, don't take that existing workflow. Like, you literally have to break the rules in order to just get, like, I could respond to this ticket, or I could leave the comment per the process or whatever, but make the call, get on a call with them, roll over to their desk if you're co-located, like make the human connection, and you will save yourselves so much time, money, agony and like you said, like build those better relationships that last well beyond the outcome of that particular conversation. So it's like developers, I feel like there's a lot of reasons why this unhealthy dynamic has calcified, but it's everyone's responsibility to reframe it and break this mold, because it's not healthy at all. And I'd say more than design systems as a concept, like that's the boring design part, is we have this like shitty process, the shitty waterfall process that's taken root, totally unimaginative things. As nice as tools like Figma are, they aren't the browser. They're not as dynamic. They're not as live and interactive. And developers, and not just the designers, but also, like you said, a diverse product team coming with all of their full selves, including their knitting interests and their 3 cats and their fluency in 4 languages, or whatever those things are at a human level.
Right.
It's that alchemy kind of coming together to actually produce good work is what yields good work. Putting everyone in those silos, like you said, is a great recipe for getting boring and lackluster results.
I could not have said that better myself. I
thank you for letting me rant. I love it.
No, this is my favorite thing about this show is that I have completely failed to define the format. So we just, play it by ear.
We're from the same cloth here. I think that that's how I roll too. It's usually like, let's figure it out. And that's, I think, like, that also speaks to it. It's like there is like that we talked about, like defensiveness and guardrails and like all of that stuff. And I think kind of like with these token systems and with like most work is like, you want these things to be rigorous. You want these things to be good and sound and true. But there's like a lot of like fear-based formality and a lot of like kind of weird processes and stuff that gets built up around making products that gets in the way of like doing good work. So
I think that the thing that is really challenging is recognizing that every one of these things is done with good intentions, right? Like, we make design systems because the intention is to make it possible for everybody to do a good job without having to be a world-class designer. Yep. We make processes because we want to make sure that things are consistent and that there's fair treatment and that people have the same experience when they work at the company. But each of those things is like, they happen in response to a sort of human failure, right? And a lot of times that human failure is just scale. You get to a certain size and you can't possibly know all your coworkers, and you can't build close relationships, and process is how we control for keeping that stuff consistent.
Yep.
But I often think that we reach for these things too soon, because the thought of having to actively collaborate is too hard to define.
Yep.
And we sort of resist it, right?
Yep.
And I think the part that's really challenging is remembering that, like, neither of these things is inherently good or bad. It's the way that they're applied is what gets the outcome. And if all we do is hang out and be best friends and everybody's having a great time, but there's like no rigor at all to the way we do things, we're in a lot of trouble. If all we do is process and nobody even knows their coworkers' names, they see them as employee numbers in the ticketing system, also not going to get a good result. And you're probably not going to, have a life that you enjoy very much, because that's very like cog in the machine-y.
Yes.
The answer, like everything, is somewhere in between. Like you want to work with real people with real interests and passions and like a third dimension. And you want to have enough structure around the way that you build that you're not inventing everything from first principles every time you sit down to collaborate.
Yes. No, 100%. And in my work as a consultant and working with teams, what I ended up finding was kind of like, returning to society after COVID. It's like we're all still, I think, kind of learning how to relate to one another and be with one another and talk to people. And I think that what you described in the stories you shared, and one of the things that I really value and love to do is to just go in and kind of inject that healthy dose of humanity and talk about, tacos and anything but the work, because that's actually really, really valuable. Like you said, like you eventually need to get to that work or whatever. But like I found that giving people an excuse and kind of modeling that and showing people how to show up and just talk to each other to say, like, rather than go through Slack or Teams or replying to each other in the ticket, to just, I could show you what a 5-minute call looks like, where you actually hash through it together and get the same results. But you're and that is, it's at first a weird thing to say, hey, I know I could just ask you this over text, and that's the convenient way to do it. You're doing this important labor to get closer to another human being, and to be cognizant of that and to cultivate that ultimately makes work and life so much more enjoyable. Because interact with people in person, not through select menus and toggle switches.
Yes, especially in a world where it feels like every business right now seems to have an underlying premise of, let's add, some technology layer that allows us to not have to meet people, leave our house, have conversations, have interpersonal relationships of any sort.
Yeah.
The ability to build and maintain interpersonal relationships always has been one of the greatest strengths that you can have in your life, in your career, in every aspect of being a human.
Yes.
As we move into a world where we're actively disincentivizing everybody from learning those skills, it's going to be an exceedingly rare and extremely beneficial skill to have built. So more than ever, now is the time to lean into this and getting comfortable with the idea of, like, hey, can I just walk up to somebody and, like, be cool with them, have a conversation, not have a motive, not have I don't have a reason to talk to you other than you seem cool, and I would like to know a little more about you.
I'm curious. I'm interested. What are you up to? And making that connection, with no thing in your back pocket that you're trying to bust out or convince them of.
And if the question you're asking as I say this is what's in it for me, remember that what's in it for you is a life that you'll enjoy living, right? And a network that at some point in the future, all of these people are going to be in positions where they're going to think about you and say, oh yeah, I remember I met Jason here and he did this and we should call him. It leads to opportunities. It leads to things that will enhance your life. But if that's what you're going in for, you're never going to get to the point where people want that. You're there to build these relationships because it allows you to have a network of people that there's a foundation of trust. If you build that foundation of trust, everything good is stemming from that.
Yes.
Whether that's the ability to execute well on projects at work, whether it's the network that helps you get your next career step, whether it's somebody who's going to show up when it's your birthday and you want to just have some friends around. Any one of those things is going to make your life better. And it all comes from just the willingness to have a real conversation with somebody and be interested in them beyond what they can do for you, what they can provide for you right now.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's like, how can you, it is absolutely possible to cultivate that in your world, start wherever is comfortable, but it is that, like, kind of, if it's not in your nature, if you're not hardwired for, extrovert, and it's not to say that you need to be an extrovert or whatever, but it's like, you need to overcome that real initial trepidation or that social awkwardness. And I'm the guy in the elevator breaking the silence. I'm the guy where I just got back from a trip and all these people are taking these beautiful pictures of these amazing places, these mountains and glacier lakes, and I'm the person that goes, can I take your guys' picture? They're trying to do the awkward selfie and get
right.
And they're like, no. And I'm like, please, I insist. Like, I always insist upon it. And that, because I know they're only reacting to that initial That's
Yeah, I
weird.
don't want to be an
Stranger
inconvenience.
danger. Yeah. So it's just you have to puncture that just very artificial, isolated, siloed existence. And that is a skill that you can cultivate. And like you said, it's going to serve you so well in every aspect of your life.
What a great point to end it on, because I don't think we're going to take it any further than that. And unfortunately, we are out of time, because I definitely could talk about this all day. But let me bring up real quickly. There were a few things for people who want to go further on the mechanics of this. So let me throw one more link to the Subatomic course if you want to go get some information on that. Maybe learn the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about as you are practicing the human side of it as well. Also, go give Brad a follow on Blue Sky, and also check out. You had some other things that you sent me, so if you want to talk about these as I'm throwing links up,
I'll do a quick one, which is we talked about Figma variables, which is how you do tokens in the Figma world. And then Style Dictionary is a tool where you describe your tokens in kind of platform agnostic ways, like in JSON or YAML or whatever. And then it will go and rip through them and spit them out as CSS custom properties or Sass variables or Swift compatible or Android compatible, or like really any format you need. That's what it's really good at. And then, so that's like the kind of, we'll say, go-to tool for doing that kind of work. Stu Robson, who's a UK-based developer, really great guy. He has been curating and rounding up really great resources about design tokens for a long time. So this little GitHub repo is has tons of different tools and articles and resources all about design tokens. So Stu's awesome. There is a W3C design tokens community group that has been like working to kind of like standardize the nomenclature and the architecture of the language of design tokens. And they've been at this for a number of years now, and they've made some really great progress. And that's all unlocking the ability for these tools and systems and people to get closer together and speak the same language. Donnie D'Amato has recently released this one called designtokens.fyi. That's a bit of a glossary for design tokens nerdery, which is good. And I think that those are some really good like community resources and stuff for like people who want to go out there. But to just like put a bow on it, like, so our course, it's like we're bringing literally all of this together. It's like, here's the concepts, here's the step-by-step on like how to do this stuff. Here's the sample architecture. We have like governance diagrams. So getting at those questions we picked at today, which is like, when do you add a new thing to the system versus when do you sort of like deviate from the system? Mm-hmm. So we have like workflows and like, kind of governance diagrams and all sorts of stuff that we offer with the course. And I created we created a coupon code called Code TV is awesome.
Is that like all uppercase?
All caps. Do all caps because we're shouting it.
So this is your discount code if you want to get in there.
Yeah, and that's gonna get you 20% off. So
nice. All right, y'all get on that. And then any of the links that I just shared are going to be available in the Discord. The link is up on the screen now. We also have any upcoming events. When we release new content, it goes to the Discord if you want to meet a bunch of people who are into interesting things. And also, if you are interested in helping me design Code TV merch, that's what we're talking about this week. So hop on in there with all your opinions, grab some links, get this discount on Subatomic, and also check out what's coming up on Learn with Jason, Web Dev Challenge, Lead Heat, and other Code TV programming. And as always, if you've enjoyed this, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, give it a like, leave a comment, share it with your friends, do all the things that signal to the algorithm that it should show this to more people. Brad, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. As always, this episode has been live captioned. Thank you to Vanessa from White Coat Captioning for being here today. We are over time, so I'm gonna wrap this one up. Brad, thanks again. Any last words before I turn this off?
Keep doing your thing, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you all so much. We will see you next time.